Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Welcome to the GDS Services Week Open Show and Tell. The next 2 hours will be an opportunity for us to celebrate some of the work that's been coming out of the government digital service over the kind of recent fall. And we're doing this at the end of Services Week, which has been 5 days of amazing workshops and sessions and presentations. We are your hosts for today. I'm going to start by introducing Iain, who is actually not here today as she's not feeling well, but she has organized the show and tell with us, and she is a design lead on gov.uk. We also have Helena. She wants to say hello.
Hi.
And there's myself, I'm Kuba. I also work in the government digital service working on gov.uk. So this session is part of Services Week 2022, which is a series of events taking place over a week, over the last 5 days, which has involved all sorts of organizations from the UK public sector. What Services Week is all about is increasing service literacy and to create a space for organizations to talk about good service transformation. It's a self-organized event, but it's supported by a core kind of group of people from the Cabinet Office. And there's lots on. This year, we've had over 50 sessions organized by 24 different organizations that include central government, NHS, local government, including trainings, including workshops, and lots of other formats. And we have a code of conduct for all events that are part of Services Week. It kind of outlines what we are doing and what we are expecting from our participants in order to establish and maintain an inclusive environment during the sessions. So please have a read if you'd like to know more about that. We're also recording the session, so your display name might be visible in the recording, and by participating in the session, you give consent to that, and I hope that's kind of okay with everyone. We also have live captioning, which you can access in Zoom. I believe the button reads view subtitles, and I think you can access it using the Zoom interface. And also, this event is public. It's not just for civil servants, not just for public servants, which is a rare luxury for us working in government. So please join the conversation on social media using the hashtag Services Week. Before we start going through the agenda and introduce the speakers, I'm going to give a little bit more context as to what we aim to achieve with Services Week. And to do so, we included a few quotes from participants. So this one says that there's been a good mixture of how-tos and show and tell formats so that you can learn what to do and add it into your own practice and also learn from other people. I feel like it's been a relatively relaxed atmosphere, which I prefer for learning anyway. This second quote describes Services Week as one of the highlights of the year for me. There's so much interesting work happening all across government. It's an excellent opportunity to spend time being inspired by everyone else and learning from how others are digging into gnarly problems. And finally, it creates a buzz to talk to the organization about the benefits of service design. Services Week help us explain to the organization that digital is about so much more than just technology. And in this session to close Services Week, we are going to talk about some of the amazing work that's been coming out of GDS. And this is because Services Week highlights the sort of values that we uphold at GDS and the way in which we work. We work to something that's called the Government Design Principles. And if you haven't seen them, I recommend looking them up. It's a great read. And one of them is that making things open makes things better. And this event and this kind of whole week of events is a really, really good example of that. And I'm going to hand over to Helena now, but before I do that, I am going to ask about whether we have a technical issue with the number of participants.
I think we might, but I think we will have to continue, Cuba.
Okay. Oh, that's a shame. Well,
Yeah.
we are recording and the recording will be available
Yeah.
shortly after.
Unfortunately, we've hit the limit of the account, so.
Okay. Anyway, with that in mind, let's crack on then. Helena, do you want to take over the screen, which I hope will work swimmingly?
Oh. Can people, is that working?
Try now.
Yeah. Is it working?
I'm still seeing the slide would make things open and make things better.
Oh, that's weird.
Maybe try again, and if it doesn't work, feel free
Yeah,
to kind of
let me
tell me
exit.
to move to the next slide.
Is that better now? Can't do a good open show and tell without the technology not working. Would you mind manning the slides?
Of course.
Yeah.
Let me know when you would like to see the next
Yeah.
one.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Helena Tripp. I'm a design lead in the digital identity program. And I wanted to introduce you to the format of today's session and run through the speakers that we're going to have today. So first up, we are going to have the international team sharing some of their work that they've been doing with the government of Cyprus. Next, we're going to hear from the gov.uk forms team and their work on helping government departments to create web versions of forms. We will then hear from a few teams in the digital identity program. So the first one will be the work of the gov.uk sign-in team, which allows government services to include authentication and identity verification within their service. That will be followed by the work of the team working on gov.uk account, which is what users see when they use the sign-in service. And finally, we're going to hear from the service adoption team and how they've been working with service teams across government in the digital identity program. We're then going to move on to the journey improvements team in gov.uk, which will take us through what they've been working on in terms of moving into the UK for work. And finally, last but not least, we're going to hear from gov.uk's work on email subscriptions. So the next slide. So we're going to use use the chat function to enable after each of the presentations to for participants to ask any questions. So please add them to the chat in the Zoom, and we'll do our very, very best to kind of answer maybe a few of them, but we might not be able to get to all of them. So without further ado, I think we're ready to hand over to our first speaker, which are Yiota, Theo, and Laurence from the international team.
Thanks. Okay, let me try and request control.
Let's try that again.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, you've heard our names already, so I won't repeat those. But yeah, GDS International, in case you haven't heard of it, you probably haven't. It was created in response to demand from governments for support. So we have three main areas to our work. The first is international delivery, to actively support governments developing or rolling out elements of their own digital transformation. Second is analysis and insights, which we feed back into shaping the UK's approach to digital. And the third is engagement with multilateral organizations like the UN, OECD, or digital nations. So we do one-off advisory support, medium-term kind of technical deep dives, I suppose you might call them. And if I can change slide. Yes, okay, picture of myself. And long-term digital transformation reform, which is what we're doing with Cyprus, which is really fun. We've got Yiota and Theo from the Cypriot side of the team on the call as well. And we had a really busy week last week, having like a lot of formal presentations because we were launching some stuff. So we thought we'd keep this quite casual, and it's a bit more of a chat. Let's see how this goes. Okay, we work in a blended team. So these are new ways of working for the Cyprus team. And our partnership is about collaboration, not just support. We've been developing building blocks of user-centered design, processes, agile government. So we've been looking at agile ways of working, procurement reform, kind of simplifying and opening up government to more suppliers. There's quite a lot of stuff. And one of the things we've been doing is standards. This might look familiar, which Theo has been leading on. So I'm just going to ask Theo, like, how did you manage the development of the standards on the Cyprus team?
Yeah, hello everyone. For me, it was a major shift from how I was working, because I had no experience in working in an agile way, or nor I had any experience with standards or services in general. It was challenging at the beginning, but I trusted the process. I learned about the word iteration and that you don't have to get it perfect from the very beginning. Now, for the development of standards, it was a whole team effort. We got a lot of help from our friends from the GDS. And at some point, there were like 15 people typing away on the same Google document, each role on its own respective section.
That's really cool. Oops, too far. Spoilers. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, and we're also learning through doing. So this is the childbirth grant, which is one of our first exemplar services, so to speak. Yiota, you've been taking on the service design role here. So it'd be cool to hear about how you found that transition into service design, because none of you have officially been called service designers or interaction designers before.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I love your community. I hope I can be part of this often. Even though I feel that I put my previous experience in the government in a good use in this team, I didn't know what a service designer is, actually. But through our collaboration with GDS, I've discovered my passion, which is an archaeologist and an interrogator. Actually, I learned how to communicate with stakeholders and internal users with compassion, discovering existing processes, pain points, and needs. Now I realize that I was already working as a service designer, but in a waterfall way. I was desperately trying to catch all the internal and external needs from the start of the project. And I was working based on assumptions instead of UR. And this was risky.
What I guess some people might be interested in like what the transferable skills are from other roles. So yeah, what did you bring into your service design role that you already had?
Yeah, analyzing user needs and the pain points for sure, understanding existing processes, and also because I was a developer, now I'm using that skills and collaborating with the devs in our team. We speak the same language, and this is very useful.
Yeah, about this, up until last week, we've done this without even seeing each other. We were doing this through Zoom, through Google Meets. We needed to develop tools to do this work. We started from scratch. We needed to develop a design system as well as a prototyping tool. Another challenge was to put user research and processes in place. From this image, you probably noticed some similarities in design patterns or components. We didn't have them before, so we adapted some patterns from the gov.uk design system. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, wherever some things exist, we use that. But if not, we've defaulted to kind of our open tools. Last week we actually met in person for the first time. I took all these photos at the same time, exact same time, walking around the kind of new space that the Cyprus team has been given in a university innovation building. So it was really nice to see the UK and Cyprus counterparts like working away together. It was a really nice atmosphere in the office. But yeah, until now, what has the collaboration process been like, Yiota?
We've been shadowing to accelerate the learning process, and it is really accelerating. It wasn't just about learning the tools and the processes that we can use, but it was most about how to collaborate with the multidisciplinary team using the agile way. There was no predefined plan. We shaped the process through discussions, although because we were used to working in a waterfall way, it was very frustrating not to know the exact steps to follow to be agile, and know that not everything had to be perfect. This was the biggest change in our mindset.
Yeah, I mean, some of that was probably just me. Maybe I was being a bit frustrating, but like not knowing what we're going to do next is like, oh, we'll work that out. And everyone's like, what do we need to do?
Or me always asking, what's the next steps?
Yeah.
We just launched a conference for feedback on this new way of working from both suppliers and buyers, using the childbirth brand as an exemplar.
Yeah. Well, what was that launch like? How big a deal is this? Because there was like, it's the first time I've presented in front of like so many people in person. Yeah, tell me what it was like.
For me, it was like I was thrown in the ocean from a helicopter.
Yeah, it was a huge event for us. It was for the first time in our 20-year career. We were panelists talking in front of hundreds of people, presenting the work we've done for the past few months. We raised expectations that we hope we will deliver soon.
Yes, we were used to being observers, even if the work was ours. For the first time, we showed our work firsthand, and we had a voice and a stage to speak. Each team member is equal, which is something new for us in our culture, in our government. Yeah. Yeah,
the design work was so much to be put in static photos as a presentation. So we created a video that it shows all the work of the UCD team from researching to designing, and then it goes to the prototyping. I don't know if Laurence has the link to put in chat, so you can see it. It's only 20 minutes, no, 12 minutes, sorry, but it's short.
Yeah, it was mind-blowing for me to see this so much work. When I watched that video, I was crying. Yeah, we did that in just a few months.
Yeah, let me go to the next slide. We've only got about a minute left, but yeah, meeting for the first time was incredible. I wish we'd done it sooner. Like the impact on our ways of working was like really improved. Yeah.
And meeting and getting to know each other and getting more familiar, given us confidence to express ourselves more easily. It was needed.
Yeah, I agree. Seeing you all in the space together and collaborating it gave me the confidence like to step back a bit more, because I'm kind of stopping those conversations happening if I'm like saying, oh, please include me in everything from the UK. So yeah, a lot of that is kind of passing that over. I couldn't get away without showing tons of cats because we were so busy, but I still managed to find time to photograph like about 1 million cats. It's the only thing I took pictures of in Cyprus. And finally,
oh yeah, that's the lead we're taking for the second service. We're discussing the design process and that we like to set out. We got the old-fashioned sticky notes, but we ended up putting it into mural because the wind was blowing, so it wasn't fun.
Yeah, it was nice to see like you planning your next service and how you're gonna like lead that. So that was really special. Cool. Theo, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, well, it's not just the standards and tools and processes that we just did. We have to bring everyone across government and public on board, because this is primarily a culture change project for us. A closing remark is that we went out for drink with the rest of the team a couple of months ago, and we saw a young couple next to us, and I just pointed out and said, you know, what we are struggling to do every day at work will directly affect those people, and at some point in their lives. So it makes you feel that you're making a difference and that you help people.
Oh, thanks. I'll pass over to Cuba.
Thank you.
Or Elena.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a really fascinating presentation. I wonder if everybody could come off mute and give the team a round of applause. Thank you. Have we got any questions?
I'm not seeing any in the chat, but would really encourage everyone to please just submit their questions in there, because we have some time for about like 1 or 2 for each presentation.
We can come back to it as well if we wanted to. Okay, so next up, I will be handing over to Betty and Iain from gov.uk Forms.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Is Iain here again?
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, so I am Betty Mwema. I am a senior service designer in the gov.uk Forms team, and my colleague Iain will introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Iain Boyd. I'm the engagement lead on the gov.uk Forums team. That was a great presentation, so fantastic to hear about the work that the Cyprus team and International are doing, so well done and good luck for the future, folks. We don't have any cats in our presentation, but we do have a cool cat on our opening slide, so I hope that's acceptable. So yeah, we're from the gov.uk Forums team, formerly known as Collecting Information from Users. So we sit under the government as a platform team, and we've grown from a really small team of about 2 to a multidisciplinary team of 15 civil servants and contractors since December 2020. So and we want to help departments to create web versions of their forms because they'll be more accessible and more mobile friendly than PDFs, and for many people they'll be more convenient than paper. So we've summarized some of the things we've done and we're currently doing to move closer to that vision of enabling users to create online forms for gov.uk without needing any technical knowledge. So our vision is this: it's for every form on gov.uk to be accessible, easy to use and quick to process. I'm trying to get my speaker notes to work, which they're not. So, oh yeah, they are now, cool. So our team is specifically trying to solve problems with lower volume document-based forms in central government. So document-based forms are those like PDFs, Excel sheets, and paper forms like Word documents, which government uses to obtain information from users so that we can provide a service, a public service to those users. And of the document-based forms, the largest group of these on gov.uk are what we call lower volume. So these are those that have between 250 and 10,000 transactions per year. So this is our focus area. Oh, sorry. Sorry, bit fiddly moving through the slides. Really fiddly, moving through the slides, there we go. So in our last count in February, there were 7,959 document-based forms on gov.uk. It's a bit complicated because there are loads of pages which are labelled forms which aren't, so such as notes, policy documents, detailed guides, and then there are lots of forms which aren't even labelled a form. And most of these are PDFs and Word documents, or ODTs, that's an open document text format, as well as Excel spreadsheets. And these are hard to use on mobile devices. So where you're scrolling and zooming, this can be especially difficult for visually impaired users and those with certain mobility impairments, for example, to do with dexterity. They're hard to use for people with access needs, and they can be difficult to use for people with hearing or cognitive disabilities. And also they don't meet accessibility regulations, which are underpinned by the Equality Act 2010 or the Disability Discrimination Act in Northern Ireland. I'm going to try and go through to the next slide. And then, yeah, departments are facing legal action. So last year, a visually impaired student won a legal case against the government department, which had failed to provide an accessible journey through their service. So how do forms affect end users? Well, if we make it easier for governments to make online forms, which are good enough, then not only will members of the public and businesses have easier to use and more accessible forms, but they'll be able to fill in forms online without struggling to edit these or to print documents, where often users don't even own a printer. Due to processing time saved, they'll also get faster responses from government, so they can do the thing they want to do quicker. So that is generally applying for something, registering, paying for, stopping or reporting something. So why don't teams make accessible forms? Well, the main reason is because most can't afford the high costs of digital data and technology specialists, which are needed to create good enough online forms for gov.uk. And this is especially the case for the teams that we're focusing on. So they're using lower volume forms, and that's why we're focusing on those between 250 and 10,000 transactions a year. I'll now hand you over to Betty, who'll tell you a bit about some of the things that we've been doing.
All right, thanks for that, Iain. That's a very slick introduction to what we are about. And so what I'm going to tell you is what we have been doing as a team to make creating online forms become a reality for government. And so in December 2020, the forms team began the discovery process that ran for about 6 months. And the discovery process is really the early research phase of a project. And in this step, we really wanted to learn the gaps and the barriers that affect accessible forms being created. And so what we really learned was that, first of all, teams face budget restrictions and lack of user-centered design skills and digital skills within departments. And so this causes accessible forms not to be produced. And so what happened is that at the end of discovery, we were very sure that a problem actually exists of bad forms, and especially in an environment where there's a very high threshold and requirement of digital services to adhere to certain service standards. And with that knowledge, we moved into Alpha in July 2021. And so this is a process where we're really testing the different ideas that the team had. And at this point, we had really grown to a team of about 15. And so the Alpha process has been running for about 7 months, since July 2021 up until now in March 2020. And in this phase, we were really testing our risk-based assumptions. And so we are really asking the question, so what are the factors that might impact the adoption of accessible forms within government departments? Next slide, please. Okay. Perfect. Next one. Yeah, next slide. Okay. Don't worry. Navigating the slides is a bit icky here and there. So a summary of the things that we've learned. So in the discovery and Alpha process up until now is that, first of all, we've been able to define what a good enough forms means, because the good enough form is what will fill the gap that I just talked about of having bad forms that are inaccessible even for the end user, who is the person filling the form, either a member of the public or a person who owns a business. And so we've been able to define what a good enough form is, and that is a form that meets the regulatory standards, that is easier to use, and that is quicker to process. We've also been able to have a good grasp of who our users are and what are their needs, and who are the key decision makers that are very creating forms for government, creating online forms. And so the platform, the gov.uk form platform is created primarily from creators. So these are people in policy and operation teams. And then also we have form reviewers and publishers who support these form creators. So this is a very key group when it comes to creating online forms. And then our ultimate goal in the very end is to better meet the needs of members of the public and businesses that use government services, because these are the people who will then fill in the forms and then the form creators and the form processors in the backend will receive responses from the public and be able to offer services. We've also learned that our core decision makers are very concerned about meeting value for money and cost effectiveness. And so we've actually decided to offer the platform at no charge to departments that will choose to use the forms platform. And then another key highlight is that we've also ascertained that Gov.uk forms will provide assurance on data control and security, and it has actually been endorsed by data protection officers and cybersecurity officers who really had lots of conversations in alpha period when we were doing our research. And also at this point, we have gained a lot of clarity of what our service journey will be. Next slide, please. And so that summarizes. And at this point, we've recently just had our alpha assessment, and we'll hopefully begin our private beta in this month. And we will be testing our proposition with real users. So we'll be working with teams from 10 departments, most of whom publish the biggest number of inaccessible forms. And at this point, we are very keen to see what experience teams have as they transition from PDF forms to online forms. And we're also very curious to see how the forms platform meets accessibility needs. And so what we will be doing is we aim to publish live working forms at the end of this testing period. And so we'll begin with one team, one form, and hope to increase as we move and as we learn more, and as we see how our users get familiar with the tool and how it actually creates accessible forms in the end for the end users. So that's all about Gov.uk forms. Thanks a lot for listening, and you can get in touch with the forms team because this was a really summarized bit of what we are doing, and so that's our email address there. So collecting user info at digitalcabinetoffice.gov.uk. You can reach us with any questions. Yeah, so that's it from us. Handing over to you, Kuba and Helena.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a fascinating presentation. This is one of those really thorny areas, I think, that we need to kind of resolve as government services. Round of applause, if we can have, maybe, for them. Thank you both, Betty and Iain. We seem to have had a few questions come in. I don't know, Cuba, if there's anything else that you've picked up. I think there's one that's literally just come in.
Yeah, there is the latest question from Wayne, which is on the tech front. Are you looking into Recognizer and Tech Extract from Microsoft and Amazon respectively, as it could play into that area? Not sure, Betty and Iain, if that's something you can answer.
Sorry, I didn't catch the question. Sorry, let me look at the chat.
So yeah, Wayne's asked on the tech front, are you looking into Recognizer and Text Extract from Microsoft and Amazon respectively? They're not something I'm aware of, but we can chat to our tech and design teams. So I'm not aware of anything that we've done in that area, Wayne. But if you want to ping us a message, then we can get back in touch with you and give you an update. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
There's a previous question as well from Vikash, which I know, Iain, you've answered in the chat, but wondering if there's anything you wanted to add in terms of what are the backend technologies which capture data from these forms and are then worked through by kind of middle office or back office teams?
So I'd say, so at the moment, the document, the online form will be able to, once a user, an end user, so a member of a public fills in the online form, so the information is fed back to the team through an email address that is encrypted, and so the department will have to specify an email address through which the form responses will be received. But then also, and then now the team would then take on to process the responses with their case management system, as they usually do it. But we're also very aware about API integration of the forms platform and departments' case management technologies. which is something we would be very interested and are very curious also to learn more about as we go along in private beta. But at the very beginning of private beta, we aim to be capturing data and it will be flowing through the email. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
And yeah, quickly on that. Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, we don't really want to store any data, so we'll do that for as minimal a time as we possibly can, and then we'll be passing that data on to our partners. So in that sense, we won't be, we'll be processing the data. We won't be considered a data controller.
Yeah, so the information just flows through the platform, really, and hopefully it's captured for, I mean, it's maintained for about 7 days, but yeah, so that's about that. But Vika, she can email us with the provided email address. I think, let me put it in the chat.
That's great, thank you. I think we have time for one more quick question. I think it's a really interesting one from Andy, which is, can you speak to the value of a 6-month discovery phase for those of us who struggle to get that kind of time for our discovery?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, you know, we're fortunate that we've been able to do that. I think it is quite a tricky problem that we're trying to solve. Every organisation, whether it's a government organisation or otherwise, does struggle with how it collects information from partners. And we certainly have done that in government. There are, you know, over 8,000 forms, as we've said. There are no kind of standard patterns, there are no standard tools. So it's a really tricky problem, which we'd love to solve. And we think that we can come up with a good solution, which is going to be beneficial to lots of teams. So I think, as Betty says, what we are working on is going to be free to use to partners. So I think, yeah, hopefully we'll be able to prove that value for money for the taxpayer pretty quickly by good adoption rates.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Helena.
Thank you, but before we do move on to the next set of presentations, I picked up a question actually that came into the chat for the international team, which I think might be nice because we've kind of got a little bit of time to ask. I don't know if you can see it, or would you like me to read it out?
I can see the one that's saying what's on.
What is the host team's biggest fear in continuing to adopt?
Yeah. So I guess it says to adopt service design, but it probably means like everything we're trying to implement. Theo, Yiota, do you have any? What's the big looming thing at the moment?
I think it's the way people work that it's most challenging, because no one or very few people know how to work in an agile way. They prefer to have things written down and pre-agreed. So I think that's the biggest challenge we're going to face, the agile methodology to run everything.
Yeah. Winning people over to the culture change is going to be the big challenge.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So up next, so we're going to have a few presentations from the Digital Identity Program. But before I hand over to Matt, I wondered, Tori, if you wanted to say a few words around the overall kind of vision and mission for digital identity before Matt takes over in terms of the presentation.
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, everybody, thank you. And thanks to the presentations we've seen so far. They're really fantastic, really exciting and very inspiring. We are part of a directorate called Digital Identity, and our core work is about making it easy for everyone to access government services. And if you think about it, right now, you all know that if somebody has to access one government service or another, different departments, they're going to have different logins, they're going to have different accounts, and also passwords to forget, and they're going to have to repeat answers to questions that they've answered elsewhere. So the idea of our program, which is actually called One Login for Government, digital identity is delivering one login for government is that you're going to have just that one login for government, just one password that you need to remember in order to access a range of services. And we're doing that so that we can keep, so that we can include as many people as possible to easily access government services. And it's one of the GDS core missions, which is a simple identity solution that works for everyone. So that's what we're doing. My team members who are going to hear from today are going to take you through a number of the core teams and products and services that we're delivering. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Matt. Thanks, Helena.
Thank you, Tori. Okay, so GDS has been working on services that allow government departments to include authentication and identity verification within their services. The first step in delivering the whole capability was to build the authentication system. So that's where we started. This was actually delivered into private beta last year, and it's known to service teams already in government as GovUK Sign-In. So that's our kind of internal name. So what do we mean by authentication? So it's the creation of an account or signing into an existing account. So you can see these two sort of parallel journeys. But due to the security standards we're working to, we need to make sure that it's secure. That means verifying credentials like email addresses and mobile numbers, and adding second authentication factors like sending codes via SMS. And as well as these two sort of main user journeys, we've been delivering ways to manage the credentials. So that includes changing email addresses, changing your mobile number, and resetting passwords. Going forwards, as well as continuous improvement, now the thing is live and we're getting feedback from real users and getting data. We're adding support for international phone numbers. So people outside the UK can still use services in government. And when it comes to two-factor authentication, we've been looking at options other than SMS to remove potential barriers where people don't have coverage or don't have phones. The goal is to ensure nobody is excluded from setting up or signing into an account. And currently the identity verification service is being integrated into this existing authentication journey. So when it comes to identity, there are services around government that require the user to prove their identity. And depending on the nature of that service, this may be to differing levels of assurance. So how do you prove an identity? So how do we do this? So it's complicated, but identity proofing can generally be split into these two steps. Firstly, validation. This is where we check that the person exists. So a user claims an identity, and then we check with the data source that we trust that that identity exists. And secondly, verification, and that's asking the user to then prove they are who they say they are. And there's a handful of ways we can do this digitally, but again, it's quite complicated. But fortunately, we have some help. We have the Good Practice Guide, or GPG 45. This is our published guidance on how to check people's identity. So we're building our services to be capable of delivering to a standardized assurance level as outlined in the guidance document. Standards are great, but as a designer, this does add some big constraints that we need to work around. The first step was to really fully understand the guidance and then speak to service teams to understand their needs, what they need from us. We established that the medium level of confidence, as outlined in GPG 45, was the identity profile that we needed to achieve for our private beta partner. Now, there's many different ways you can reach a medium level of confidence, and here's just 3 of them. An identity profile is essentially these 5 categories, each with a numbered scale, and higher scores in one category impact the scores needed in others to then reach that level of confidence we need. So you can see in, I think, the first bar chart, the strength of the evidence given maybe a passport is very strong, so to validate the verification method used then to validate that identity could be lower. But what does this all mean to users? of the service. If we zoom out a bit, we can actually see what the full end-to-end journey would be for an end user, starting at a service. So this could be DBS, which is the service you'd go to request a basic criminal record check. A user in this case would then require identity, and they would get passed firstly into GovUK sign-in, and they would either then sign in or create an account and get them passed to the identity proving part. So inside that orange block is where I've been working for the last year pretty much, and it hides a great amount of technical complexity. So let's kind of zoom in to see what's inside. So at its core, what we're essentially building is an engine that calculates the identity profiles and determines if a user is at the level we require before then returning them back to the service they came from. Around it, you can see these microservices that are responsible for collecting the evidence and the attributes we need to do the checks. So for private beta, our MVP, we've started with the simplest journey we can design and build, and that's using a passport as the evidence that we'd accept, and doing some fraud checking, and then followed by answering some knowledge-based verifications or KBVs. In our MVP journey, users get moved in and out of these separate microservices in a particular order that we set, because there's only one journey through. But in the future, this architecture will allow us to keep adding these microservices, so we can collect different types of evidence, and we can allow further verification methods. This then allows us to offer choice to users, given the options on the type of evidence they want to use, and then the kind of verification methods they prefer to try. And early in the program, we split up the identity team into two, one to produce this MVP and the other to then looking at inclusivity. So a range of discoveries have been done to identify barriers the users face, including, say, for example, not having a photo identity document, low digital literacy, lack of financial footprint, complicated address histories, name changes. There's a lot of potential barriers. We've also been analysing further evidence types, and there's over 100 different sources of data we can potentially tap into. So we understand their coverage, which barriers they unblock and present, and how feasible or viable each of them are. And when it comes to verification, not only are we investigating a range of government and external data sources that we can tap into to generate the knowledge-based verification questions, but also looking into vouching and using open banking as potential options to do verification checks. So in the future, what we expect to deliver this year is a product that has multiple dynamic journeys, that accepts multiple evidence types and offers a choice of verification methods, and additional channels like apps that can also accept evidence and do verification checks. And that's it. Thank you.
We have, thank you, Matt and Tori. Could we have a round of applause for both of them? Thank you. So before we move to the next presentation, have we got any questions, Cuba? I think there might be one.
Yes, I can see one from Yiota, which is, how do you manage an end user with multiple passports? Asking because we have this issue here in Cyprus.
How do we, okay, so I mean, for our MVP, we're just doing UK passports. When I mentioned using apps as other channels, that'll give us the option to do chip scanning. So you can then pull data off the chip and then check that passport's legitimate and use that as a form of evidence. So currently, if it's a Cypriot passport in the MVP, we can't allow it. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Unless there are any other questions, I don't see any others. Perfect. So we'll move over to the next presenter. So Vicky, talking about gov.uk account. Vicky, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Helena. So yes, hello all. I'm Vicky Teinaki, and I will be telling you a bit about the gov.uk account. And there's one probably very important question to start with. what do we mean by the gov.uk account? Before, you've just heard about gov.uk sign-in from Matt. And really, the easy way to think about it is that when people use the gov.uk sign-in service, the user account that they create is the gov.uk account. So it will become the center of how people can reuse their data across government. So I'm going to talk a bit about what we've done in relation to the gov.uk account in the last year. And I want to use this moment just to do a bit of a shout out to the many people that have been involved in this. I'm just the person that's presenting, but I don't get much, I don't deserve the credit. Even from the UCD perspective, we've got a few interaction and content designers working on this, which is Rose, Mel, Ali, who you will hear from shortly. And even in the past, we've had some designers leave GDS who were involved. So a shout out to Roz, Gavin, and Connor. So yes, many hands have been involved with the work that we'll be showing you now. So the work that we've done in the last year can fit into 3 broad themes. The first is the basics of building an account. The second is getting people to the right account with the right sign-in credentials. And finally, interaction and content patterns for moving users to the gov.uk account. So let's start with that first theme, the basics of building an account. Apologies. My screen was slightly slow. So some of you may remember the Brexit checker and the Brexit checker account. It's retired now, but was running for a while. We use this as to start an exploration as to what it would mean to have a home account on gov.uk. It also became the first product to use gov.uk sign-in, which we'll talk about a little bit later. As part of this, people could sign into the Brexit part of the gov.uk site using a bespoke header. So you can see there's a picture, an example on the screen of seeing on the top right of gov.uk sign-in. However, the user feedback from that fed into our next theme, which is getting people to the right account with the right sign-in credentials. And namely, how do we help people with different sign-in credentials when they exist for using government services? I'm going to go back. There we go. So our colleagues from the sign-in team, who you've just heard a bit about from before, have developed some mindsets for how different users approach gov.uk based on the sign-in credentials that they have for government services. By the way, Lauren Walton, the user researcher on sign-in, actually spoke about this on the GDS podcast in January, if you're interested in hearing more about it. I think what's important for looking at today is that people with one sign-in credential might get confused if they stumble across the gov.uk account by accident and think that they already have one. And this is what we found with the Brexit checker. So this led to us developing the sign into a service experiment on gov.uk to help users get to the right service, regardless of what sign-in credential is required. This is live, it's on gov.uk, you can see the link, gov.uk/sign-in, and it's been live since the 4th of December 2021 and has been performing well. And the next theme is about interaction and content patterns for moving users to the gov.uk account. What patterns could be helpful to manage that change? So I mentioned before that the Brexit checker was the first account to use the gov.uk sign-in. Before we were using just a bespoke sign-in credential. So in October 2021, when we moved the 60,000 people over, we learned a bit about, what does it mean to create comms? How do we manage that change? So whilst it was a small group, it was helpful for learning about tools such as comms. And more recently, we got to use some of that knowledge again. We made the new get emails about this page feature allow for migrating existing gov.uk email subscriptions. And so here you can see some stuff about the pattern for saying that things were changing, saying that they could merge their other subscriptions. My colleague Ali will be talking about this in a little bit more detail right at the end of this show and tell. Finally, with this theme, some other teams in the program are considering, what it means to migrate users to the gov.uk account. So that we're thinking about themes such as sometimes it's best just to let people start from scratch. Sometimes you might want to link things. Sometimes we might be able to find ways to connect information. This is all very early days. We're just thinking about it. And again, sorry, other teams are thinking about it. So I think it'll be one, watch this space. Some more information should develop. What we're thinking about now. So this is, the stuff we've been talking about is, things that we have been doing, but there's more. So something we're interested in is going between gov.uk and a service using the gov.uk account. How do we make sure that users know where they are as they go through their many interactions with the government? In particular, we need to make sure that this works for people whose journeys aren't linear. So if you see the example on the right here, just the understanding that people are moving around and you see it in the headers, and we just need to think about that. And in this respect, we're currently looking at ways to let services bolt on ways for users to manage their gov.uk account sign-in credentials based on what's already in their service. We're aware of the government design principle to be consistent, not uniform. So we're trying to figure out how a pattern might work with existing services. What you see here on the screen is sort of hot off the press. It's a starting point of what's being designed. We've taken some examples of some services that we know are interested in using gov.uk sign-in. And in the example on the right, managing your gov.uk email subscriptions, need it now. Already we've found that different contexts might need slightly different options, ranging from letting the services decide where on the page they want to put it. So if you notice in the examples here, one example, you might want to put the detail at the bottom, another at the top. And we also have to think there might be scenarios where it's just completely different. So again, the example on the right, manage your gov.uk email subscriptions. The service is so small, it doesn't have a separate profile page. This is very much sort of working in the open. We're taking this to user research shortly. I think we're going to be doing some testing on Monday, and we're also going to be discussing this with the service teams that are interested in, in using gov.uk sign-in. Another thing we're thinking about is moving towards a global sign-in. We know that users expect a sign-in link on gov.uk. We've seen it a lot in user research. And we're interested in looking at when and how we can introduce this. And we will be working with our colleagues on gov.uk, on the gov.uk program for this. So what would it mean to put the sign in? What's the right time? And are there other things that might need to change? So you can see at the bottom of the screen, examples of when sign into a service, will it change as the gov.uk account becomes more prominent until the day when we don't need it at all? You just sign into your gov.uk account. And finally, what might it mean to have a homepage for services that you've used? What do users need to see? And how can we make sure that we can get the right information from services? Again, this is early days, but something which we're keen to continue looking at. More than anything, we're aware that sequencing and allowing for things to change is an important part of developing all of these features. We're thinking about how these things might change both across time and in relationship to each other, which is, you can sort of get a flavor for that in this, in a part of the map, which is shown here. And that's it. So I'll hand back over to Helena.
Thank you, Vicky. That was brilliant. Big round of applause from everyone, if again. For Vicky and team. Amazing. I think there are a few questions in the chat, but before we move on to them, Cuba, just wanted to flag that I added a link to the podcast that Vicky referred to with Lauren Walton and Charlotte Crossland in the chat, if you wanted to have a little bit more of a look into the mindset to work around accounts. Cuba, over to you.
Lots of good questions. I think we have time for quite a few. So the first one from Nanami. which is, I would like to know more about what you thought of to help the users understand the idea of identification and account intuitively.
Yeah, so I can. Sorry, who's someone else going to talk?
No, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, I mean, yeah, actually you answered that, Vicky. I think it's probably more in your territory. I just say the initial alpha experiments we did with sign-in, especially with identity part, we did a lot of different experiments to try and figure out the best way. But it will be services that kind of need us to do identity would have to probably mention it on their side as well. So people understand that the service is a service that requires identity and set people up for the journey ahead, that they're going to have to do a check and come back. So it's kind of a split between us and the service. But you know, every kind of beta experiment we do is constant discovery and trying to find better ways to do it. So we haven't cracked it, I don't think, yet.
I guess I'll maybe do a flip part to do with accounts. I think something that we've found is you know, it's helpful to talk about things when it's useful. So you know, that sort of an account is a handy concept when you can do lots and lots of things with it. So yeah, in the short term, you know, doing a sign-in which is just one or two things, it might just confuse people a little bit. So yeah, I think when we're thinking about stuff being intuitive, it's making sure we talk about things at the right time.
That's great. Thanks, Vicky and Matt. Next question was about research and was about usability testing and was from EB. The question was, what number of people do you usually try to get during usability testing? Would one of you like to take that?
Yeah, I can do it. Well, I'll talk for my team. I think it's based on standard. I think there is, you know, a general government service standard principle of, you know, 5 users per sprint or the like. So when we do our rounds of usability testing, we normally do try and get 5 or 6 people. And yeah, doing it, you know, if not every sprint, fairly frequently. So you're always trying to make sure that we're getting stuff in front of of people fairly regularly.
That's great, thanks. And one more question, which is from Toth, which is, will users have to create another account if they have multiple credentials for different government sign-ins?
I'll jump in and do that one if you like, Kuba. Hi, Toth. Ultimately, the goal is to have one user account that does replace all the various accounts across government, and we're working with the different departments to come up with strategies to make it as easy as possible for people to move from any other account into this single government account. And as Vicky showed you, there's a number of different approaches that we're looking. So in practice, people will have to somehow get from where all these different accounts that they're at into this single account. And what we're doing is figuring out the best approach to make it as seamless as possible and as easy as possible for people, but also something that we can accomplish across government.
Thanks, Tori. I think that's it for the questions for this one. So over to you, Helena.
I think it is. Okay, so next up, I think we've got Courtney and Beth, who will be talking about the work that we're doing in digital identity around service teams and engaging with them. So over to you both.
Yep, that's right. Let me just check that I can drive on these slides. Perfect. Right, so hello everyone, I'm Courtney and I'm an interaction designer, and I'm also joined by my colleague Beth, who is a content designer. And we are part of the service adoption team working within the digital identity programme. So our aim as a team is to support the rollout of gov.uk sign-in by making it easy for service teams to adopt it. So we're going to give a super top line overview of how we've engaged with service teams to shape their onboarding experience with gov.uk sign-in. So we need to focus on service teams because our long-term goal is to be the only government login. So without high service adoption, we've essentially just created another set of login details for a user to remember. And that would mean that there's no real benefit to having a reusable account. And we've also learned from other platform products like gov.uk Notify, Pay, Platform as a Service, or PAS, and Verify. And the first three of these all have a self-service onboarding experience that we know works really well. We also know that Verify did not. And essentially we're learning from all of these experiences. So our primary users are people on service teams that are looking to use gov.uk sign-in, but this is a really varied picture. So when we say service teams, there is a real mix of team structures. So it could be a large multidisciplinary team, it could be a team made up of any combination of civil servants and contractors, or it could just be a couple of people. And it includes all the roles who may sit on a multidisciplinary team. So generally the people who get in touch with us first are the product managers and technical architects, and developers and designers tend to get involved a little bit later on. So we have a unique position within the digital identity program in terms of our users. So service teams are our users, but they're also focused on delivering a service for their users. And those people are the same users that the rest of the digital identity program is designing for. So we need to collaborate really closely with the service teams so that the end user experience that we're both creating is seamless and easy. So we've created an onboarding journey, and we mapped out that journey and essentially broke it down into 4 stages. So the first stage is find out. So there are various ways you might hear about gov.uk sign-in, but these should all point you to our product site. Stage 2 is evaluate, so accessing content that helps teams understand if gov.uk sign-in works in their service. Stage 3 is prepare, which is a series of checks that teams go through to confirm that they're ready to go live with sign-in. And finally, stage 4 is go live. And after each of these stages, we have a decision point where we decide whether to let a service team into that next stage. And essentially we've designed at the moment stages 1 and 2, so find out and evaluate. And taking this approach means that we can manage the flow of service teams through onboarding. We can make sure that we learn from services at each stage as well. So this is what the homepage of our product site looks like. And our main call to action at this point is for service teams to register their interest in using gov.uk sign-in. And then this is what our evaluate stage landing page looks like as well. And from here, users can access information on stuff like user journeys, design patterns, and technical documentation. And part of that is about accessing the test environment. And what that means is that they can integrate with the product to see how it works for themselves. They can see what data they get back, and they can also plug it into their own prototypes to test with users. So now I'm going to hand over to Beth, who's going to talk about how we got here.
Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk about, as Courtney says, how we got here. The first thing that we've done is that we have spoken to service teams a lot. So we've taken 2 approaches to speaking to service teams. If we can do the next slide. The first one is we're engaging at department level to make sure that our high level plans are aligned, but we're also doing sort of grassroots work with individual service teams so that as soon as they're ready to adopt, they can just get started. Just to give you some numbers for this, we have carried out 137 initial interviews with those sorts of grassroots individual service teams. In those, we've been finding out things like what their service actually is, what their sign-in and identity checking needs are, what other features they might need, for example, what sorts of 2-factor authentication, and also what stage of development they're at, so how likely is it they can adopt soon. We've also done 30 in-depth interviews, sorry, Courtney, back one, 30 in-depth interviews where we've really dug more into their departmental context to understand the wider picture. And we've done multiple rounds of user research at every point in our design process too. So the user research has looked like this. We've done lots of qualitative interviews where we've asked service teams about their expectations and the sorts of mental models they have of onboarding. We've also done lots of usability testing where we've put the current product pages and onboarding flow in front of them and seen how they've navigated them. And we've done lots of content testing too. So how well do they understand the technical documentation and the specific actions they've got to take? So with that in mind, I'm just going to briefly go through 5 things that we found to be the most crucial things that we include in our onboarding journey so that service teams can make a decision about whether to adopt. The first one is that they need a clear value proposition right from the start. So their very first questions are normally, what is the product, but also what's the value for us and what is the value for our users? Even if it makes the service team's life easier, they don't want it if it's not going to make their users' lives easier as well. Next, we know that they need lots of information to help them work out if their timelines align with ours. So they need to know obviously what features are available now and a roadmap of when more features will be added. But to really plan ahead, they also need to know things like what tech we're using, what people will they need to implement it, do they need to run their own research or have we covered that? And also what kind of commitment is expected of them if they join now, which is private beta. So how much do they have to help us out? We know they also really need to get quick personal responses to their questions. So we do have an online support form that we're using for the onboarding journey, but we know that teams can see those as really impersonal. So we've added a Slack channel so that they can also get quicker responses to smaller questions, and that's working really well. We know they also want to play around in a test environment. So tech people in particular are really keen, we found, to just integrate with the thing and see how it works. And the less that's in the way of them doing this, the better. So we're trying to make that possible. And finally, with that in mind, we know they need to be able to self-serve. So our process we found has worked well enough so far, but it is only an MVP and the journey is very manual. So it involves sending a lot of emails back and forth, and we have to manually give access to every individual service before they can access our test environment. And this is a pain for us because it relies on us having a few key people in the team to do all of that work. And it's a pain for service teams as well because it just slows things down, barriers in the way of them seeing how it works and considering whether to adopt. And finally, we also know that it won't work on a bigger scale, which, as Courtney said earlier, we need scale for GovUK sign-in to really realise its potential of being the only login for government services. So our future plans, believe it or not, are to build a self-service version of the journey so that users can self-serve. So we've looked to GovUK Notify, Pay and Platform as a Service to see how their onboarding journeys work. They've all got this sort of self-service interface that service teams can use and get started with really quickly. And so in ours, we've been prototyping right now. Users will be able to do the tech setup without having to come through us. And we are going to be testing it with service teams very soon. So we're excited to see how that goes. Our other future plans are just to monitor and improve the service that we've already got as well. So we will be doing lots of user research at every point, getting their feedback on the overall journey to inform future improvements. And we'll also be looking at their support requests as well to make sure that we can really learn from what questions we haven't answered or haven't made clear enough so far. And on a more strategic level as well, we're going to be looking at the sort of wider adoption funnel, like how many services are coming. Oh my God, the lights turned off. Oh, sorry. The lights have turned off. Don't know why. So we're going to be looking at the adoption funnel and seeing what we can learn from it. And we're also going to think about the competitor landscape too. So what other sign-in products, maybe in the private sector, do to help their services on board and see what we can learn from there too. So finally, if you want to get involved, if the things that we've shared from the digital identity programme today have been interesting to you, you can read our blog posts. I'll put the links in the chat in a minute, and you can take a look at our product site, which I've already put in the chat earlier. And if you're from a government service team too, on the product site, you can register to come along to our CrossGov show and tells, which we do every 6 weeks to give an update about where we've got to. And you could also possibly join our private beta. We would love to have you. That'd be very exciting. So that is all from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Courtney. If we can have another big round of applause for both of them. Cuba, have we got any questions from the chat?
So we have Katie asking about, Katie who works at Land Registry, asking if she could get a copy of the diagram you showed earlier in the presentation. Would that be possible, Courtney?
Could I ask which diagram? There were a couple of little things. I think we had, there was one that had loads of blue dots, and there was also one that had all the sort of little page thumbnails.
Okay, I'm sure we're gonna hear from Katie on the chat, so perhaps we can coordinate that on there.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
We also just had another question from Andy, which is a really, really good one. Could you speak to the difference between the initial interviews that you've held and the in-depth ones?
Yeah, sure. So the initial interviews are ones that we do with every single service team that registers their interest in GovUK sign-in. So they register their interest on our product site, and then we arrange a 30-minute phone call with them to find out just sort of at quite a high level what their service is and what their authentication and identity checking needs actually are. The in-depth interviews was a specific like proactive piece of research that we did, where we went out to different departments and different service teams and did sort of much more in-depth hour-long interviews to find out just about them in more detail, really. So the difference is more about sort of how they've come to us, I think, and the depth of information that we got from each one. But the end goal is kind of the same, to learn about the service landscape and work out what their needs are so that we can use that in our process.
It's really clear, thanks, Beth. I imagine you have quite a comprehensive understanding of all the services that the government operates.
It's pretty good, but I think it seems like a never-ending quest. Like there's no central list of services, and even if we think we know that we now know loads about services, there's always more we can learn. There's always services we've not spoken to yet.
Cool, thanks both.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the Journey Improvements team, and I'll hand over to both Amina and Lorna.
Hello, thank you. Cool, can I make it move? Yes, it's working, amazing, cool. So my name is Amina, I'm a service designer on GovUK, and I'm part of this team moving to the UK for work journey.
And I'm Lorna, and I'm also in the same team. I'm a user researcher.
Cool, so today we're going to talk about the purpose of our team, the work we've done so far, and what we're doing now, and what we're hoping to do next. So our team is currently working on improving user journeys on GovUK. And you may be familiar with the site. You probably visited it at one point in your life, perhaps to use a service like apply for a driver's license or get guidance on how to do something like how do I apply for a passport. It's usually where users end up when they want to do something related to government. And it's part of our job at GDS to make this as straightforward as possible. Our team was set up to help government improve complex user journeys. These journeys are where users need to interact with government to complete like a complex task or a series of tasks. For example, a recurring transaction with government, such as tax returns if you have a business or are self-employed, or long-term transactions like setting up a business or moving to the UK. These steps might sit across one or multiple organizations at a time. Oops. So by improving user journeys, GDS aims to help government work together to simplify tasks for users. So that's the broad goal that we have as a team. So what are we improving? We're looking at improving the user journey for moving to the UK for work. This particular journey is disjointed for users, and there are complex problems to be solved. We're working in partnership with the UK Visa and Immigration Agency, so they're known as UKVI. They're a team in the Home Office, so we're really excited to work with them actually, because it would be great to partner with them in improving this journey. And whilst we're focused on this journey right now, we're hoping to apply our learnings and ways of working to other journeys in future as well. So wherever we learn from here, we're going to apply to whatever else we work on in future. So what does the journey look like? So this is the journey for moving to the UK on a high level. There are lots of things that happen within each step, but these are the broad phases of the journey. For example, exploring options to move to the UK, then applying for a visa, receiving an outcome of that visa, arriving at the border if you're successful with getting the visa, living in the UK, and then extending, switching visa, or even leaving the UK after your visa period is finished. Oops. All right, so our users. So our users include people who are coming to the UK for work in particular, are currently outside of the UK, need a visa to work, or might be sponsoring dependents, so a partner or a child. And what we've done so far, since we're new to the visa process as a team, we needed to do a lot of reading and talking to experts to understand the space before we delved into making improvements. We're going to quickly walk you through some of the activities we've done. To understand the space, one of the first things we did was look at the key pages related to the journey, and we used data tools to look at how users are currently interacting with them. For example, we tried to map out the main stages users have to go through to get the right content and services. Here's a set of pages we expect, or we might expect users to go through as they apply for a visa. Mapping user journeys allows us to create diagrams like this, and they're called conversion flows using analytic software. And this diagram in particular shows the proportion of users who complete the journey we mapped out previously. So earlier when you saw those pages in sequence, this is the conversion flow of it. That's how we can track users going through this particular journey. And it allows us to see where users are dropping off in the journey, and we can then do further analysis and user research to try and understand why users are doing this so we can improve the journey.
So alongside that data analysis work, we've also done a lot of reading and making sense of documentation and user research from UKVI and other GDS teams. So this slide shows the steps that we took from reading the documents. You can see there on the left, lots and lots of documents, and pulling out the insights like user needs, pain points, where they might be experiencing challenges, and placing them onto a map that we had created with the different phases of the journey, like you saw earlier that Amina showed you. So this told us where in the journey people had these different user needs, perhaps, or pain points. So to show you a bit of what that looks like in practice, on the next slide, this is how we visualized our understanding of the journey so far. It shows the different tasks that users might need to do when they're moving to the UK to work, and the different government departments involved in providing the services along the user journey. It's a really useful way of making sure that we have a shared understanding of that journey. And on the next slide, then we put all the information and insights that we had gathered onto an empty version of that map, just with the main phases on it. That was a really useful way of understanding where on the journey people were experiencing challenges, and also for sharing our knowledge with other teams and within the team. On the next slide, to work out the biggest challenges that we should focus on first, we pulled out all of the opportunities that previous teams had identified, and we grouped them together into common themes, and then we summarized these groupings and rewrote them into statements that summarize that problem. So we came up with these problem statements, that are drafted statements. I won't go into each of them, but they broadly capture the things that users can struggle with along the journey. We then, on the next slide, evaluated each problem statement against a set of criteria. That helped us to narrow down the most valuable and feasible problems for us to work on. Back one, that's the one. So doing that prioritization exercise resulted in us deciding to work on these two main problem statements. So users struggle to find the content they're looking for through search or navigation, and users struggle to choose the visa most relevant to their circumstances. We then revisited the insights that we'd found so far in relation to these specific problem statements to dig out as much relevant knowledge as possible. So for the first problem statement about finding information, we realized that we needed more research to really understand better the challenges for users and what they might need. Whereas for the second problem statement about choosing the right visa, we had enough knowledge and context to be able to start working on how to improve this aspect of the journey. That brings me on to what we're doing now, and I will hand over back to Amina.
Can't hear you, Amina. I'm not sure.
No. Are you still there, Amina?
Might be connection.
Maybe. I could probably carry on if she's not here. Okay, let's get the slides back up.
Oh, I'm here, but I don't know what it did. Can you see the screen? It wouldn't let me unmute for a while. It was weird. Can you not see my screen?
It says it's loading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cuba, would you be able to share what slide is it?
Can I bring if I get rid of back?
Yeah.
I will just reshare.
I'll give you back the remote control, and then can you go back to that slide and I'll do it again.
Yeah, perfect. What's the number of the slide?
I think it would be 124.
124, perfect.
Okay. Could you try taking control again?
Yep.
Should be back on.
Cool. All right. So for problem statement 2, we ran sessions with the team to think about ways we can solve our users' problems. Here's a screenshot of some of the brainstorming that we did. So we came up with lots of different ideas and put them on a board together. And the next thing that we did was we wrote some hypotheses to help make sure we're thinking about the impact of our designs and the outcome for users based on existing problems. We've been thinking about how we can measure success here as well. Oops, let me do it, please.
I'm happy to change it for you, but it looks like it's moved now.
Yeah, so here is an example of a hypothesis. They tend to look like this. So if we make X change, then Y will happen because Z problem will be removed. Oops, I think we missed a slide. There we go. So here's a little fun example. So if our users shut their laptops after the show and tell and have a nice cold drink, then they will feel more relaxed because work is finished and the weekend is here. And anyway, on Monday, we're hoping to take those hypotheses we've created and validate and prioritize them alongside UKVI. So getting them involved in the process and doing this together.
So, okay. Following on from that, these are just some of the things that we hope to do next. Next slide, please. We're going to, after we've decided which hypotheses we're going to work on with UKVI, then we're going to start sketching out our ideas for changes or new designs that might have an impact. Then we'll test these changes with users and start to build the ones that seem to work. And we're also anticipating that we're going to need to do further user research to better understand our users and their experience of going through this complex journey. So, next slide. As Amina mentioned at the start, we do expect that in the future, we're going to take what we've learned about working on user journeys like this one and apply this way of working to other journeys. And we're planning to blog about what we're doing. So if you want to learn more, do keep an eye out for that in the future on the GDS blog site. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Amina. Thank you, Lorna. Should we have a big round of applause for all of you and the gremlin that decided to take over Zoom?
It wouldn't be a virtual event without a Zoom error.
Exactly, Amina. You know well about that. Thank you. If we could have a big clap for both of them. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, Cuba?
I don't see any in the chat, so please, if you have a question to Amina or Lorna, do post it in there. And as we wait for one, I kind of wanted to ask one, if that's okay. I'm interested in how you kind of found working in these spaces where there are so many kind of different organizations and departments involved. How was your experience kind of doing that and managing that?
Good question. I think from my perspective, it's been, well, the approach we're taking right now is working with one department quite closely. So UKVI in this case, they own quite a lot of the journey. So working closely with them would kind of help us like gain momentum and see where we can make iterations quickly and improve things. So I think keeping it small but focused has been quite helpful until we feel more confident to perhaps work with multiple departments at the same time. But Lorna, do you have any ideas on it?
Probably not much to add to that. It's fairly early days for us at the moment. We've spent a lot of time looking into the work that they've done and what they've found out. So really, I think the next stage will be sort of increasing our engagement with them, and we're really looking forward to collaborating and learning a lot more from them. And it seems like, yeah, the couple of teams that we have engaged with so far have been really interested. So yeah, we're quite lucky with that, I think.
Thank you. We have a question from Nanami, which is a great question. It's quite a broad one. So it's how do you, and if it's not something you feel like you can answer, then that's totally okay. How do you introduce service design to the organization when not everyone is interested in it?
That's a very good question. Not one that I have the answer for right now. I feel like Lorna says, it's quite early days yet. So we'll see how that goes about. One thing for sure, the UKVI, from what we've heard from so far, they seem really keen and interested in learning about the hypothesis approach that I've mentioned. They're keen to see what that's like because it's so different to how they work right now. So I'm hoping it's positive, but I don't know enough yet.
Thanks, Amina. Okay, I don't think we have more questions on the chat, so I'm going to hand it back over to you, Helena.
Thank you. So next up, we've got Ali, who will be talking about some of the work around email subscriptions.
Thanks. Hi, I'm just going to request remote control and hope everything goes to plan. Right. Hi, so yeah, my name's Ali and I'm the senior content designer in the GovDUK account team in GDS. And that worked. Yes, and I'm here to tell you about this new button, the Get Email About This Page button, which you can find on lots of gov.uk pages as of this month. So on the 1st of March, so on Tuesday last week, we added this button to about 158,000 pages on gov.uk. This means that users can now subscribe to get an email every time any detailed guide, publication, or consultation is updated or unpublished. Although it is worth noting that there are 4 deliberate exceptions to this. There were 4 pages where the button would have clashed with some of the existing ways that departments already had for getting users to subscribe to updates. So how does it work? Essentially, users who want to use this feature need to create a gov.uk account, and you've heard all about the gov.uk account. When they click on the Get Emails About This Page button, users are prompted to create the account. After that, they need to confirm that they want to subscribe to the page where they started, and that's it, they're subscribed. Once that's happened, they can go into their account and manage all of their subscriptions. And if the user happened to have old topic-based subscriptions to the same email address that they used for creating their account, those subscriptions are migrated to the new account so that they can manage both their old topic-based subscriptions alongside their new page-level ones. Another key thing about the button is that when a user is signed in, the button changes on the pages that the user is already subscribed to. It changes from Get Emails About This Page to Stop Getting Emails About This Page. And this is kind of noteworthy because it's the first time that there is an element of being signed in on gov.uk. For the first time, sort of gov.uk is responding to someone who is signed in. So how did we get there? So last year, the gov.uk account team, my team, was tasked with exploring the question of what gov.uk could offer users who are signed in. So what could a signed in experience look like on gov.uk? And to look into this question, we did some experiments and some exploratory research and mocked up sort of a bunch of different tools and features that we could think of. Things like content recommendations based on the content or services a user has used, or saving a user's location so that content about their nation is prioritized over other content. The ability to save a page so users could get back to it later, and of course the ability to subscribe to updates about a specific page. And we found that there was a real user need for the ability to get page level notifications, especially for repeat specialist users of gov.uk. Here's an example of a quote from a user research participant who works in the care home sector. This is what they had to say when they saw the feature on COVID guidance. They said that having something like this would have been really useful because I could have subscribed to pages that I specifically needed. I'd be able to subscribe to all of those and be notified when those specifically had been updated, rather than me having to troll through all the other COVID-related email notifications that I've had. Sort of really powerful testimony from people. And so once we identified that this need was there and decided to build the feature for page level notifications, we built a prototype and ran 6 rounds of user research to test and refine the journeys. The research was really thorough, and we even tested like all the emails that users would get part of the journey, that kind of thing. And it was really valuable because the research really helped us make several key decisions. Things like, for example, what language to use on that button. So like we found that get emails was much better at setting the expectations than, for example, get updates or get notifications. And really importantly, the research helped us make decisions about how to describe and position the gov.uk account that users would have to create as part of the journey. You heard from my colleague Vicky about the challenge of getting users to the right account, and there was definitely an element of that challenge in these journeys. We also worked with accessibility experts in GDS to make sure that the design was as inclusive and accessible as possible. And we made some changes to the styling and implementation of the feature to make sure it would meet the needs of users with access needs. And yeah, we're really grateful for that advice. And yeah, finally, before rolling out to the thousands of pages, we did quite a lot of prep. So we made sure we engaged with publishers across government. We knew that this feature was going to have an impact on some of the decisions that content designers make day to day when they update or unpublish individual pages. And we really didn't want this to come as a surprise to them. And also we trialed, before rolling out to everything, we trialed the feature on a handful of pages just to make sure that it was working as expected and to get a sense of how much resource we'd need for user support once we rolled it out to everything. Yeah, so how did it go? It went pretty well. On the day of the rollout, 544 new gov.uk accounts were created. And at that time, this was the biggest number of accounts created in a single day. This isn't a measure of success on its own, and we know that, but hopefully it sort of gives a bit of validation to the idea that there was a need there. Another thing is that everything held up. No major issues have been reported. There was a small increase in support tickets, and we're monitoring them for patterns, but we can't really see anything like sort of big and scary that we should be too worried about. And we had some nice feedback from users, from service teams, and from people who watch digital government. And here's a little bit more encouraging data. So since we launched the feature, these 3 pages, which are being updated in response to the situation in Ukraine, have been some of the pages with the fastest growing up number of subscribers. So as of yesterday, the 10th of March, the UK Visa Support for Ukrainian Nationals Guide had 241 subscribers. Apply for Ukraine Family Scheme Visa had 301 subscribers. And the local sponsorship scheme for Ukraine had an amazing 2,598 subscribers. And that's kind of increasing all the time. And sort of hopefully this shows that the feature is already having an immediate impact at a crucial time when the information that people need is changing on a daily basis. Right, so what are the next steps for my team? We're monitoring the impact of the rollout on signups to accounts. More and more people are creating an account every day, and we sort of need to keep on top of that. And as Vicky said, we're now going to start exploring things like how users will navigate from services to the Gov.uk account, and having this live use case will be really valuable for that. And that's it. That's me.
Perfect.
I go back.
Thank you very much.
Give up control.
Thank you very much. We do have a few questions on the chat that I'll hand over to Cuba in a minute, but just wanted for a last one, round of applause for Ale and other speakers, if we could all come off mute. Oh. Cuba, over to you. There are a few ones in the chat.
You. Yes, some
good
really,
ones.
Really good questions, and what a powerful case study that is. First question we had on this one was from Andrea, and it was about how the emails that people receive actually kind of look like. Is it a daily roll-up of every page you're subscribed to, or is it like numerous notifications for each different change? How does it look like?
Yeah, so we've kind of set it as the default. When you sign up, the default is that you get an email every time the page is updated. So if the page was updated 5 times, you get 5 emails. But you can change that very easily to either a daily email or a weekly like digest. So you in every email there's a very clear link to change frequency if you want to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Another question that we had is from John, which was, are there any plans to extend the feature to other content types? Things like manuals would be really helpful. So John's team published and managed the highway code, the manual format, and users being able to sign up for email alerts would be hugely helpful.
Honestly, I hope the answer is yes. What I'm about to say might be a bit of a cop-out, but basically my team has moved out of Gov.uk onto the Digital Identity Directorate. So we won't have as much influence on what happens to the notifications product. But my hope is that well, I know this is on the radar of the Gov.uk leadership. And if these features is successful, hopefully that it'll be added to other guidance type content, because yeah, if it's valuable on a detailed guide, it would be valuable on a manual, I'd have thought.
I think thanks for that, John, because yeah, that kind of feedback will definitely help us strengthen the case for such changes and improvements. We've also had a couple of couple of points about how this sort of helps us measure engagement with content. And John also asked a question about whether there are any plans to make it easier for content design teams to see how many users have subscribed to each page, and saying that it will be a really useful addition to the content data app. Perhaps I can take this one, as I've been thinking about the content data app a little bit recently, and yeah, totally. We're very aware that this basically creates a new way of measuring performance of content, and are hoping to learn more about what it means and what it says as more people start using the feature. Any other questions to Ale about email subscriptions? I don't think I can see any others in the chat, but thank you for all of those. Back to you, Helena.
I think it's over to you to wrap it up.
Oh, it is indeed, yes. We've made it to the end.
Woohoo! So
thanks again to every single presenter. That was absolutely brilliant, and it was so good to hear about the work that you've been delivering all across GDS, and I found it super inspiring. So I'm gonna ask for another round of applause because that was really, really good. Great. So that we work in the open in more than one way. This is just one of the things that we do to talk about our work. Most of the pieces of work that you've heard about today are things that we have either blogged about already or that we are about to blog about. So please do kind of read and subscribe to our blogs. We have a number of them. We have a kind of big GDS one, we have an Inside UK one, accessibility, design notes, and also a blog about services and government. And we really encourage our teams to talk about the work as much as they can. And equally, please follow GDS team on Instagram and on Twitter, where we also talk a lot about what we're up to. And I would also add that GDS is hiring in various roles. We're hiring designers, we're hiring developers. So please, if that interests you, do search for GDS careers. And thank you everyone for coming. I hope you have a nice rest of your Friday afternoon.
And just a plug, the session as it's been recorded will be added onto the YouTube channel that I added the link into the chat. So just watch that space and hopefully you can share it a little bit widely with colleagues once it's out. Thank you.
Thanks.